everyone's having such a good time and being so busy. I want to welcome you all to what is a sad, but also a very happy occasion. Sad because we're recognising the end of Hans's rather distinguished academic career at the Sydney Dental School, unfortunately. And happy because it's the start of new directions, new life, new focus for Hans and Jan. And he's not one to stand still. I know he's active in lots of other areas, and I think we'll all be very interested to see how the future unfolds for them both. Just to give you a little bit of background before we get into a couple of other speeches. Hans graduated with BDS in '83. He was thankfully only in general practice full-time for 3 years. He keeps explaining to me how general practice works, how a restorative dentist works. And I had to say to him the other day in a robot meeting, no, we don't use silver points anymore, Hans. That went out with the ARC or probably before it. But,
I never liked them anyway.
Oh, thank God for that. You won't ever have to touch them again. But he spent 3 years in general practice, which is sort of a good grounding. He did some ongoing part-time practice, and then went on to do a PhD, finished that in 1991. Then over the next 7 or 8 years, he moved on to different postdoctoral and postgraduate sort of movements all over the place, starting at Wesley, moving to Melbourne, and then going to Vienna. His first appointment with the university was in 1986, when he was appointed as a part-time pathology tutor in the Faculty of Medicine. And sometime after that, he drifted across to dentistry, for which we're all very grateful. And I know that all the students that have gone on in the past are exceptionally grateful. He moved through various promotions, some easily, some not so easily, and then became head of oral pathology in 2005 and achieved a personal chair in 2013. He's been teaching for the university and researching within the university for 35 years. I've known him the whole of this time. And before that, because I was teaching him. I'm sorry, Hans, I don't remember you as a student. But that's actually good, because I only remember the really bad ones. So that's a bit of a bonus. We have a few short speeches tonight. And to quote Hans, Neil Hunter on research, Stephen Cox on being an HDR student, and me on teaching, then him on being annoying. Unfortunately, Neil's not able to be here with us tonight, but don't worry, because Hans assured me that he would be able to pick up on that topic as well. I'll pass over to Stephen Cox, who will talk about being a student, an HDR student of Hans's, and how he survived.
Thanks, Liz. And true to form, that's not what I'm going to be talking about anyway. But again, can I just follow up on what Liz has been saying? Thank you very much for coming along. It's great to pause, isn't it? And to appreciate a moment, or to have a moment in time set aside where you appreciate all that is going on in the class. And in a sense, that's what this is all about, isn't it? It's pausing for a moment, acknowledging what's happened, and then moving on. And it's a bit like a marathon race, isn't it? You know, that life is a marathon race. Every now and again, you see highlights. You know, you dash, you see the start of the race, you maybe see the end of the race, and there are a couple of events during it. But as spectators, we normally just see the highlights. You know, the points in time which we don't mind sharing. Well, actually, that's not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm just going to pause and just share with you a couple of moments of the intervals between the highlights.
Is there a way we can close those doors there? They might cook up a bit. Might block out some of the extraneous noise.
So Hans and I,
Thank you.
we represent two totally different disciplines: oral pathology, oral surgery. It's an unlikely combination, and yet for the past 20 years we've worked together. We've worked together quite well. And just to share with you the character of Hans and his nature, I just want to pick up on two things. It's unfortunate that Neil Hunter isn't with us today, because he'd be able to share a great deal on Hans's research and what the significant boundaries, significant discoveries. But I want to just sort of share with you a moment that I had with Hans. I'm not a researcher as such. I'm a surgeon. Any one of you who knows anything about surgery, we're good with our hands, not so good with our heads. and yet I came back from Nepal, from Asia, with a significant surgical problem. And Hans, I sat down with Hans and said, how are we going to sort this out? He said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I don't mind working with you and together trying to work out what's going on. And so pretty much we started, Hans was my supervisor, and together we explored the intricacies of a condition that nobody really knows a lot about. Nobody quite knows how to treat it. But we do know more now than we did before we started. Any of you who are Hans's research students, any of you who have worked with Hans in research, will know his obsession with data, and the fact that data is really the means of determining which path you make. So as a novice to research, I had quite a lot of data, and Hans's refrain was, we just follow the data. It takes us to where we need to go.
Yes.
The heartache, the pain, but there is no such thing as errant data. There is no such thing as data which is not meant to be there. It is all meant to be there. We just need to work out what it's telling us. There may be a mistake in documenting the data, but the data itself is always true. And so that's where we go. And so following the data is really what I learned from Hans. We don't discard data because it doesn't fit in with our preconceived ideas. We try and understand what those outliers are telling us. And from there we move on. And so it was together that we followed the data into the murky pathological world, scarred, bruised, misunderstood. Me and the data. and the second glimpse, the interval between the highlights I want to share with you is APO, the Association for the Promotion of Oral Health. You heard of it?
Yes. Yes.
We lived it. Quite. So this started in 2003, and it was in response to the inequality and under resourcing of public health in Australia, public dental health. And what was done, what the association did, and really what Hans guided us on, was to use the data again. Use the data to trigger discussions. Use data to motivate the conversations and to really change policy, put pressure upon the policy makers to be relevant and to support those, the normal Australians, the non-privileged Australians, the man in the street. And this was Hans's way of using data. This was Hans's way of using his position to change policy and to make possible what was thought to be impossible. Now, if I can go back to, I started with a marathon analogy. I might just, to wind up, I might just sort of revisit that. Some of you will remember, and some of you, the others would have read, about a Tanzanian marathon runner in the Mexico Olympics in 1968. Tanzania, lowlands. Mexico, high altitude. He was a marathon runner. And at the 19-kilometre mark, he had a bad fall. A bad fall that really would have finished him. He dislocated his knee, but he went on to finish the race. He finished the race an hour and a half after the last runner. Well, he was the last, but you know what I mean. And when interviewed and asked why he continued running, his reply was, "My country did not send me 5,000 miles to start the race. My country sent me 5,000 miles to finish the race." John Aquari went on to win many international marathon races. And he became a motivation to many of us. Friends, it's been a privilege to be a spectator and at times a fellow runner in the university part of this marathon race. And Hans, we say thank you and farewell, but we look forward to running perhaps some other part of the race in the future and watching, being spectators. Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Stephen. I've been tasked to make some comments about his teaching. Yeah. Look, Hans, as shown in the Unit Study surveys for many years, Hans is a dynamic, I'm not sure that was a good idea.
It's always a good idea.
Dynamic and engaging teacher, and he is totally passionate about oral pathology. I've forgotten how animated and educational his lectures were. I haven't been to one for many years until I sat in one of his presentations as part of the research seminar series that he gave. It was probably in 2019, just before I left. He was roaming around at the front of the lecture theatre, pronouncing, and at one stage thumped the wall, which took me a bit by surprise. It certainly made the point, and it really tells you he's not someone you can easily ignore. He gets his message across, the students appreciate it, they get the message and they understand it. To follow a theme that he spoke about in relation to my teaching career in 2019 before I left, if you count the number of students he has taught over his 35 years, the approximately 3,000 students were provided with excellent training in oral pathology. This translates to the care of about 5 million patients when you look at 1,600 patients per practicing dentist. This is a huge number of patients who he has transferred valuable and vital information to the students so they can recognise oral cancers, oral diseases, and appropriately support those patients. Sadly, with the demise of oral pathology teaching within Sydney Dental School, I can only speculate that the students are not going to be anywhere near as well trained as they have been previously. There is only so much Babak can do when he's got the load of all those other schools teaching as well. One of his greatest accomplishments in teaching was the seat pedals. Now, you don't know what that is, do you? Clinico-pathological learning sessions. It took me a while to figure that out. I had to look it up again today. Hans put in 25 years of work into the development and the delivery of the seat pedals. And it was delivered for the dental students, and it was working on developing levels of training over years through their program. He took quite a bit of flack from the students in the feedback in the early years because he was, as they felt, overloading them with too much work to do prior to the sessions and during the sessions. But with revision, review, and multiple cycles of feedback, responded to their requests, streamlined the program, and got really quite excellent reviews. Fantastic program. I'm almost too scared to ask what's happened to that. I must admit though, one of my struggles as the Associate Dean of Learning and Teaching at the school was doing battle with Hans. He thought oral pathology was the most important discipline out of every discipline in the school.
It's self-evident.
See?
Second. That's the point.
Probably anticipating and giving more teaching time or assessment opportunities, but he was misinformed. Clearly, tooth cons was the most important. And I'll have some support for that here. Hans and I have known each other for a long time, 35 plus years. We've worked together at uni as well as activities within the Royal Australasian College of Dental Surgeons. We've had ups and downs, we've had bits of biffo, but we've always bounced back and have got an excellent working relationship that's always had friendship underlying everything. And for that, I'm exceptionally grateful. Thank you, Hans. I've had a number of roles in the last couple of years since my demise at the Sydney Dental School. I've been a support person, which I'm honoured to have accepted the opportunity to be a support person for him at some difficult meetings. I've been proofreader for a number of frequent and lengthy submissions. I'm getting quite good at that now. But I think my main role was to try and limit how long he talked in meetings. Usually by kicking him under the table. That was my instruction, kick him under the table and get him to stop. I'm assuming the bruises have all healed and you haven't been eternally scarred.
It's my pride that's injured.
Rubbish. But I'm now completely out of practice, and I'll pass it to you, Hans, with my thanks for an enduring and long-term...
Thank you so much, Stephen, for your very kind words, but also thank you very much, everybody. Of course, as you know, I have a lot of words to share, so I've summarised them here. And look, also, please let me start by saying thank you, everybody who is here. Thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you for being here. I must say that one of the interesting experiences that I've had since becoming unfavoured, shall we say, is that there's actually, I see people in the corridor, I have seen people, and that you almost have a sense that there's sort of a fear that redundancy might be catching. Sort of like a COVID thing, you know, that sort of if you get too close, I said, oh, maybe if you wear a mask, if I put a mask on, I might know who I am. it really is remarkable how that there is a sense that perhaps you have to be just a little bit brave. So first of all, thank you all those of you here, because you are the brave ones. Those of you who have courage. And guts is very short order these days. Thank you. Look, also I've had some sort of vague warnings from some corners, and I won't mention who it is, that perhaps I shouldn't go on for too long. Now I'd like to say it's my party, and I'll damn well bore you if I like. I'll bore you, not a problem, I'll do that.
Nothing that you could say that would ever be boring.
Thank you very much, Gordon. You're right to the top of the class. Always a good thing. Always a good thing.
Always knew how to suck.
And so, look, I considered just sort of to try and put things. I thought I'd start sort of really my story, because I wanted to tell you really sort of the story of my association here and my association with all of you. And I thought we could perhaps start on the very snowy day in Rothenburg in Germany in the year 1960, the day I was born. And but I figured perhaps for the sake of brevity, I jumped way ahead to the year around about 1969. And that was the year, I think it was 69 or 70 or sometime around about then. My parents bought me a couple of little Lyrebird books. I don't know if you know the Lyrebird series. Probably not. They were like kids' books, Maybe they're all, I don't know. And they were very interesting books for me. I mean, I was fascinated when I was a kid with anything to do with nature. I mean, the Australian Museum was my place. That was my favourite outing as a small child and as a bigger kid. These two books, one was about Eric Worrell, the snake guy. You know Eric Worrell, the snake bloke, Australian snake hunter. And the second book was about Macfarlane Burnet. Macfarlane Burnet, one of our early Nobel Prize winners, who was instrumental in working out how the immune system, really conceptual model for how the immune system works, and he got the Nobel Prize. But reading that book, I mean, I've got to say, the idea of becoming a snake guy didn't really impress me. It was like the venomous animals, not my thing. But reading about Macfarlane Burnet in my little Lyrebird book, I really must thank my parents, because that set it for me. I can be a virus hunter. Well, of course, I never got into viruses, but I could be a scientist. What a thing that would be, to spend your life trying to understand the world. And that for me was an exciting prospect. As a little kid, I knew then, and that was basically, I became a monomaniac. And I'm a bit of a maniac in many regards. And so that was from then on, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to be a scientist. I wanted to do research and discover stuff. Now, forward a bit later on through school and whatever, by the time I got time to go to university, I realised by then that science, you just might not be able to feed yourself. And, it's a little bit tough, because what do you do when you run out of grants? You probably start to starve. And being an immigrant kid, I figured it's good to have money. But I still wanted to do science. So I figured, look, I'll do some sort of clinical thing. And that just chanced to be dentistry. Frankly, the idea was I had dentistry as a good backup. It would be my backup. I could be a scientist and have dentistry as a backup. And if everything went to shit, I could always fill teeth and make a living. And honestly, that's why I did dentistry. No other reason. That was the reason. Which was actually, I think, a very reasonable reason. And it's still, and there's nothing wrong with it. So that's how I got into dentistry. And so that's just the truth. And the thing was, when I started going into dentistry, I had no idea exactly what path I'd take, but eventually I realised that you had to get an HMRC scholarship and you had to do a PhD, and that was going to be the pathway back into science from dentistry. And at the time that all that was happening, we were in Wagga Wagga, because there's not much point training in dentistry if you never actually do enough practice to fill a tooth. So I figured I'd spend a few years filling teeth, get good enough at that, that'd be okay. Now, at the time, we had Sophie, and we were living in Wagga. I was, running a little surgery. We were making enough money. It was fantastic. Helen's parents were living very close. Sophie was very small, and I was the principal breadwinner. And we had an understanding that unless I got the NHMRC scholarship, there would be no PhD for me. That I had a responsibility to feed the family. But if I got the scholarship, I got to go. And of course, Helen thought there's no way that I was going to get a scholarship. He's not as smart as he looks. He actually doesn't even look that smart. So, but of course, then I called up Canberra, and I was so pleased. I was so excited. I remember I was in the laboratory, the surgery laboratory. Picked up the phone, called up Helen straight away. Sophie was in the crib, and I told her, okay, I've got the scholarship. We're going to Sydney. I'll do the PhD. And Helen's response was to burst into tears. And she burst into tears, I think, quite rightly, because she knew better than I did that I was committing us to a difficult path. I was committing us from a good living as a country dentist to living with difficulty and nothing but trouble. And she was right. She was right. I did commit us to a very hard life. We had 4 years of absolute hell doing a PhD in Sydney. But the funny thing is, I didn't care. And that's just the horrible truth. Because the horrible truth is that, and over time, I finally realised that professional scientists and researchers are just a little odd. Just a little weird, just a little obsessive. Obsessive is the correct word. You'll forgo income, you'll forgo status, you'll forgo security. You'll challenge your own health. I used to wade in radioactive sulfate because that's what I had to do. Just a little bit mad. Very much. Have you gone past some poor soul who has a serious mental health disorder and is dancing around excitedly, creating a sculpture out of twigs and leaves and bits of paper and assembling them in a fence, and they're so excited and they are creating something. For them it's a great work of art, and it is a great work of art. Only they can see it. And I realised that the only bloody difference between that poor bugger and me is that I got paid. I got paid. Which is fantastic. I love that. And I have to quote now, I wrote it down here exactly, something that my beautiful wife Yan told me this morning. This is an actual quote. You don't know how abnormal you are.
High five.
Well, I mean, that's fine. Sure. I can't deny it, it's sort of true, Here we are. That's an actual, genuine, 100%, I didn't say that's just what she said. Anyway, but irrespective, abnormal or not, I have had the most wonderful adventure. I have had a fantastic adventure in my life. I don't regret anything. I've had a wonderful adventure. I had a wonderful adventure as a dentist. I mean, the thing about adventures, any adventure is only really an adventure if there's a good chance of complete bloody disaster. And in fact, my current demise is evidence that in fact, I have really stretched that adventure as far as you can. But I had a wonderful adventure as a dentist in Wagga and then in various practices. I enjoyed dentistry, but my heart was always in science. I had a wonderful adventure as a PhD student working at the Institute. I had a wonderful adventure in Melbourne as a postdoc and in Vienna. That was a fantastic adventure. More recently, I had a wonderful adventure in New York, and I've had a wonderful adventure here in Sydney in the School of Dentistry, believe it or not. And in Europe, we had a difficult choice. Actually, I had a difficult choice. Helen really wanted to come back somewhere English speaking, and it was tricky. I mean, they offered me. I had this one. They offered me a tenured position in physiology there. We just got a 10-year grant that gave me a postdoc and a research assistant and a trip to Sydney once a year, and it was just fantastic. So that would have meant staying in Vienna. There was another fantastic opportunity in London. Crispin Scully, who involved most of the Eastman, and John Vane in the Harvey Institute. John Vane, he got the Nobel Prize for working out the arachidonic acid pathway. They stitched together a job for me. I could have been there sharing that. So I had the choice of going there or Vienna, and I then chose to come to Westmead. Now, I've got to say that perhaps that wasn't my wisest career choice, but it was the right choice. It was the right choice because I've been selfish. I've been enormously selfish enough. It was time for Helen. It was time for the kids to have their go. And indeed, I did get something out of coming to Sydney. I really did. I mean, apart from knowing you, but it was exciting for me to know that I was coming back here to join Murray Walker to help build this brand new discipline, which was an obvious deficiency in our school. We didn't have oral pathology. I'd never learned oral pathology as an undergraduate student. I knew that was a gap, but I thought it was sort of a wonderful thing to be here and have part of the mission to make every dental student stronger and better than I ever had been. To fill that hole, to make my school strong. And I took great pride from that. I took great pleasure from that. And it was also just wonderful to be part of this new adventure to help build a new thing in this country, in this school. And I had wonderful mentors. I've had amazing mentors. I'm very fortunate. I had one from Neil Hunter, who unfortunately can't be here. He's not feeling very well, unfortunately. John Gibbons, Bob O'Grady, David Agar Cameron, Howard Kramer, you wouldn't know, Brian Cook, Bound Bender in Vienna, and I've got to say Murray Walker, my predecessor, was a wonderful mentor. He is a wonderful man and a wonderful inspiration, and I had the most fantastic mentorship I could ever have hoped for. And I remember Murray once speaking of leadership. Murray spoke of leadership once. And he said, leadership, the thing is, what that's about, it means just watch me and do what I do. That's leadership. And I thought, I reckon that's pretty bloody good. I think I'm going to try and do that. And so I watched Murray and I tried my best to emulate him. I can't. He's a different man. I can't do Murray Walker, but I tried to learn from him because he showed real leadership. And I've got to say, at this time in history, in our university, in our school, and indeed in our society, there is a hell of a lot of whittering on about leadership. But in truth, none of these muppets could lead anything. To lead, you have to have qualities that are admirable. I find nothing admirable, and I find no clinical or any other competence in these people. They cannot lead because they cannot do, and you cannot follow people who cannot do. And I would say they're full of bullshit. But I would say follow Murray, because Murray could do things and he could lead the way. That's true leadership. He also once said to me, he was a great guy, he once said, the only things worth fighting for are matters of principle. Now, he was talking specifically about an academic environment, and I couldn't have agreed with him more. He was absolutely right. I mean, that had always been my instinct, but it was certainly nice to hear Murray affirm that principle. things of principle are the only things worth fighting for. And I really did feel the same. Right? Now the thing is, what are the principles that we as academics fight for? What do we stand for? Well, I have to admit, I've always thought that a good academic, and certainly a senior academic, is meant to be half Santa Claus and half annoying gadfly. And I would say that my lifelong effort on the physique of Santa Claus has been enormously successful. So I've got that right, I reckon. And I think there are many people who can testify that I'm extremely annoying. So I feel that I've done my bit to grow into that role. But I do believe that academia is always supposed to be standing for the dignity of expertise and collegiality and honesty in what we say, truth in what we believe and say, adhering to facts as they stand, not bending the facts so that they suit you, but instead bending yourself till eventually you can fit the realities that are empirical. Academia is about freedom of speech, about freedom of expression, about open argument, collegial discussion. Now, I've got to say that I have tested those, I've lived my life along those principles, and I have tested our university for its ability to adhere to those values that it espouses publicly and its documents. And I've got to say, I found our university wanting it. All those traditional academic values have now been replaced with jackbooted authoritarianism. And I find that sad beyond belief. I find that very sad. For me, the university is always a place of scholarship and decency and collegiality. To see it become something different is very painful for me. And I think it's painful for everybody in this room, most likely. Now, some people might say that I have been naive. That I've been naive in my approach, naive in my openness, naive in my stance. And I would have to admit there is some truth to that. There's an argument to support that. Let me tell you a story of when I was doing my PhD. I've got to say that they were very hard years. And, two little kids and a mortgage and a cat and a goldfish and, and a wife who wasn't really particularly impressed with me. And all of a sudden, in the middle of this time, I developed this really quite marked arrhythmia, cardiac arrhythmia. And I'm thinking, great, terrific, now I'm going to die. Fantastic. Before the experiments are done. So anyway, I took myself off to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist did the stress test and thing. And this is an older guy. I was just a boy, and he would have been in his 50s, I imagine. And he's sort of asking me, well, what are you doing? And I explained what I was doing, and he said, oh, well, then it came to the diagnosis. His diagnosis for me was, well, the thing is, Hans, these exact words were, you are stressed out of your brain. That was his diagnosis. You're just stressed out of your brain. And he says, this arrhythmia won't kill you, it's a benign arrhythmia, but the stress will kill you. And I'm actually thinking, oh, well, there's time to finish the experiments. Good, that's okay. Because that's what obsession's about. But I've got to admit, it's true. So, but then came another part of the conversation that I thought was always remarkable for me. He said, well, what do you want to do long term? What do you want to do? What are you going to do for a career? And I said, oh, look, I want to be an academic, teaching, research, service, the usual academic mix. He said, all right. And as I said that, we were sitting opposite each other. This is a guy in his 50s, I was whatever. And he said, oh, look, academia, very, very political, very political. I was so green, so naive, I have to admit. This is what I actually said. I actually said, oh no, I don't think so. Oh no, look, it's a fellowship of scholars. And as I was saying these words, There are a few occasions when you can see a thought bubble forming over someone's head. I saw this thought bubble. There's this older guy, he's seen everything 1,000 times over. The thought bubble formed over his head, and in the thought bubble appeared the words, well, this boy's just going to have to learn. and indeed I did. I did have to learn. And of course I did learn. But I've got to also say that my conviction and my belief in those fundamental academic principles has never wavered. Has never wavered. My convictions are not for sale. And so I've learned, but I've not bent, and I believe that was the right thing to do. I'd rather lead than bend on those principles. Now, I've also been told by some people that with concern, with genuine concern, and I appreciate it, I really appreciate it, they've said, well, you know, you've been used. People have used you. And please, those of you who have thought that or felt that, please be reassured. If I've been used, it has been knowingly and willingly in my full knowledge with my complete and utter consent. Because being used is what a senior academic is supposed to be. That's the Santa Claus bit. Santa Claus comes with presents, not really expecting lots of prezzies back. So don't ever worry that I was naive. Don't ever worry that I was used. I was glad to be both. I have no trouble with any of that. But I've got to say, I have found it all enormously rewarding. I have had enormous fun. I have had extraordinary fun. Working as an academic, I've loved the teaching, I've loved the research, I've even loved the service. I haven't loved the bureaucracy. I hate Iraqi. Kari, what it was called. You know, it's just bloody all the units of study, Jesus. But nonetheless, I have loved every minute of what I'm doing. I've so enjoyed it. And I've heard it said that the definition of success for a human being is to have a place of some value, any value, in a group, to be part of a tribe. And let me say that for me, I found great pleasure in being part of this group, part of this tribe, part of this extremely odd group of people. This very odd group of dental academics and fellows. For me, that has been a great pleasure. And so I think I need to recognise that, and I need to tell you that, how much fun I've had knowing you, knowing all of you. As I look around the room, there's some little funny anecdote that spins around in my head about each of you. I dare not tell you what that is. But I've had great fun. And we've had many people who have come and gone. Some people would have liked to be here, some people are too frightened to be here. Some people are unable to be anywhere, you know, wonderful people who have come and gone. You know, I often think of Evelyn, Pat Skinner, what a gentle soul she was. You know, with her books, I treasure her books of short stories. Someone like Kathy Broomley, Jeff McKellar. You know, all people who are good people and who shared with me and shared with all of us, I think, the mission of what the school is about and the conviction and the fellowship that we are trying to do something great together. And I have really enjoyed that. I've enjoyed being part of this tribe. And I have a wealth of memories, I have a wealth of anecdotes. Let me say I have great fondness for you all, almost all of you. Some people not so much. But I've really enjoyed that. So I'd just like to say this is my chance to say to all of you, thank you. Thank you very much. A bit like Bob Hope, thanks for the memories. Thank you so much for everything and for being my tribe for so long. Now, I have to say that this really is goodbye. I am actually out of the school. I shan't be languishing about the school. I'll still be working with some of you in different contexts, and I'll still be in contact with some of you, but in truth, I'm gone. There's something enormously final about redundancy. That's a very clear statement. You're out, you're not wanted, and you know what, frankly, so be it. You won't be seeing me hanging around. I had actually thought that perhaps I would end my days sort of quietly as an aging academic, wandering about the corridors, trying to encourage the young people. Well, that's not to be my fate. My fate is somewhere else. And I'm very glad to have Jan with me, and the two of us will go off and we will discover our fate together, wherever it might be. If I'm not to be an academic at the University of Sydney, then I shall be an academic freelance. So I shall always be an academic, but I'll be doing academic things in a different way. And I'm optimistic, and of course it's an adventure, and because it's an adventure, it has the opportunity for complete and absolute and abject failure, and there is no other way to have fun. So I know that whether we are successful in our strong arch adventure, we will either succeed or we will fail, but I know we will have enormous fun. And frankly, that's pretty good. So I really have to thank Jan for sharing a life and loving a very abnormal man. To have the courage to do so is really something. Jan is a person of great courage. You'd have to be. I also must say that I'm very glad that love is blind. Thank you. So let me please ask you to raise a glass with me and wish each other well on our respective journeys. Thank you. Goodbye. Good luck for us all.
Cheers.